Meet the Minister with Terry Fenelon, Fridays at 10 a.m. only on Rev-Up St. Lucia 97.1 FM.
It's now time for Meet the Minister, hosted by Terence Fenelon. Mr. Fenelon, welcome.
Thank you, Andre. Good morning to you and your listeners on Facebook, YouTube, X.
That's right.
Where else?
That's it for now.
Mars? For now. Andre, it's nice. I think... I think we did apologize when we did not have the guest.
Yes,
so that's
we did.
Okay. Now today we don't have a minister, but we have somebody close to the minister, because the minister was supposed to be on this morning. Unfortunately, the schedule, he had to travel, and this is a heavy hitter. Now that is why sometimes we do not, although we have a roster, I do not announce prior who is coming, because sometimes these things happen.
Yes.
I could tell you who was supposed to be on this morning, because with all what is happening with the visit of the Nigerians, the foreign minister
was supposed to be here.
Was supposed to be
wow.
here. But at the last minute, these things happen, and he had to travel. He's traveling today, so I have to make the apology on behalf of Meet the Minister. It's not by design. I mean, you deal with people who have responsibilities, and so I have with me now someone special, he'll tell you why, what connection we have. Calix George Jr. Now I call him Curly, and there's a reason for that. He'll tell you how. So welcome,
Thanks
Calix.
very much,
It's
Mr.
the first time
Fenelon.
here, right?
First time, certainly.
Yeah,
yes.
Right. It's very nice to be here.
I'm very glad to be here.
You want to tell the public what connection we have?
Yes, of course. Mr. Fenelon was my grade 6. Well, at the time it was standard 4. Common entrance class teacher, and so of course he guided us. At the time it was about 39 boys, because we were in the shift system, and in those days a lot of pressure for places.
Right.
And of course, I think we did reasonably well that class. All boys, and I think there were a number of us who ended up going into St. Mary's College and all
about 20-something.
20-something out of the 39.
So what school was that?
Oh, St. Aloysius RC Boys, probably.
Okay.
RC in Castries.
Roman Catholic boys.
I always associate you with the Barbano Secondary School.
But I had a life before that.
Before that, yes.
But let me tell you something about Curly. Well, Calix George, that you all don't know. Yeah, he was a top cricketer,
Not so good.
But since his common entrance, we didn't have Facebook or YouTube at the time, but he was number 3 on the island.
Yeah, that's correct.
He should have been number 1, Andre.
Number 3, what?
He came third on the island.
The ranking.
Ranking.
Yeah.
He should have been number 1. A little silly error in the mathematics. He could tell you that. When we worked the sum, and I'm right, on the steps, I said, oh, Curly, you'll lose 2 marks there. And that dropped him, But, we did not have Facebook, so we're on Facebook now. So, yes, he's a scholar from times immemorial. Now, your neighbor, Bushel, Charlie Bushel.
Oh, Charlie. Yes, Charlie. Yes.
His son.
I noticed that.
Notice his son is number 3 on the island.
Number 3. Yes. And
so
congratulations. Congratulations
Kai,
to him.
Yeah.
Kai.
So your neighbor is also number 3. He has repeated the feat, And so that's.
And of course, as we're talking about Africa, I realized the student who came first in the island and first in the Caribbean, his first name Madiba. After the great Nelson
Mandela. Not Mandela, and Nelson Mandela. But we are here this morning, and it's really nice to have you, Calix, my student, who has surpassed me in all departments, cerebrally.
Maybe only in terms of the hair.
and Calix is kind of an expert on, I love to listen to him. I have a bias. I tell people that already. I have a bias. You know what I mean?
You've told me so already.
I've told you so. I have a bias, when it comes to Curly, because he's very intelligent and knowledgeable. And he imparts the knowledge, When you listen to him, you learn something. And I learn a lot too, because Andre, don't think we learn from each other. And that is important. He reminds me of Claudius Francis. When Claudius used to host, we knew he was a SLP supporter, but he came in for a lot of information. And you learn things, you learn protocol, you learn this and that and the other. So, it was a learning experience. And
I agree.
Yeah, and
I agree.
And Curly has that dimension to him. He will educate you. Actually, one of the best interviews I heard you do, Curly, we're coming to Nigeria in a while, was with is it Dr. Fulgens at South Louis College? Yeah. Remember when they were having this exhibition at the Anglican school?
I remember the exhibition, but I actually don't remember the interview.
You don't know, well, I did. I was by the beach. You know, normally the beach is my second home.
Yes,
I swim and I relax, listen to my music, and stuff. And you did that. And it was so refreshing, that I don't know who was the interviewer and the interviewee. You all were just so well matched and stuff and bringing out the information. This is something that was remarkable. So that has stuck with me for a while, So your wealth of knowledge, your depth of understanding and how you could relate to things, that's important, So we're going to Nigeria, and we don't want to waste too much time.
Of course.
I have you here as the expert. When I say expert on stuff, I mean there's been the hue and cry, but the visit of the President of Nigeria and his delegation, what it is you think that meant to us? How significant is that?
Hugely significant on so many different levels, from a cultural, historical perspective, from an economic perspective, from a geopolitical perspective as well. I think it is a major milestone in terms of our foreign relations and how we are, in fact, looking at our future, seeking to make partners that, in fact, can cement a more secure St. Lucia and a more secure Caribbean. And I think we have to appreciate quite often that alliances with larger powers, especially given the fact that we are small island developing states here in the Caribbean, are very, very important in terms of our security. And when I speak of security in a very, very broad sense, not just in terms of defense security, but I'm speaking about food security, energy security, right? These are all very important. And the reality is we're small. We will always be very dependent on the rest of the world for a lot of different things, right? We look at our situation in terms of imports, for example, and we are a major importer of nearly everything we can imagine. Yes, we would like to push ahead to be able to become more self-sufficient in a lot of areas, but the reality is that we have to connect with the rest of the world, both in terms of bringing in as well as the need for exports as well, in terms of what we can get from the rest of the world. So these relationships are very important, and traditionally those relationships were formed by our colonial heads, if you like to call it that. The United Kingdom, of course, which we got independence from, pretty much formed what is our foreign policy in some degree. Of course, even before we became an independent state, as a colony, we got a little bit of power in 1967 as an associated statehood. But then, of course, the foreign policy and the national security was still held by the United Kingdom, right? As we've now, of course, moved beyond that, and we're trying to form alliances, of course, with our immediate neighbors, the Eastern Caribbean, our French neighbors, Martinique, Guadeloupe, our Caribbean community, CARICOM, that 15-member grouping. We also have to now look at alliances beyond that. And of course, we've traditionally, as I said, had very strong cooperation with the United Kingdom, but also Canada, the United States, of course, a significant player and market there. And then now, of course, we've been seeing how, moving beyond that, some relationships in Asia, like Japan, like that of Taiwan, for example, and even in South America, the likes of Venezuela, the likes of Brazil. Those have been our partners in varying degrees over the years. Mexico, I should also mention, we've been trying to strengthen relationships with that country as well. And these are all significant players for different reasons in the world. But we have not traditionally been able to keep very strong relationships with Africa.
That's right.
Prior to, during the colonial period and then even that immediate post-independence period, our relationship with Africa was largely through the Commonwealth, which of course is a UK grouping, former colonies, and as well through a grouping called the ACP, Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific. And that was a grouping that was effectively to allow for a relationship between Europe and its former colonies, the ACP. And so, but in as much as we were grouped sometimes as ACP, the actual cooperation was not geared towards ourselves, it was geared towards Europe.
Yes.
And so Europe was the middleman, so to speak, in that relationship. This move currently, in terms of seeking out direct relationships with Africa, is certainly a continuum as to what we've witnessed over the past couple of years. We've seen pacts being signed between the CARICOM and Africa. There's been an acceptance by Africa that the CARICOM is in fact its sixth region.
Right.
Africa has the North African countries, the traditional, mostly Arabic influence, Islamic countries in the north, the Saharan influence countries, Mediterranean influence. You have West Africa, of course, which is Nigeria is the largest part of. You've got Central Africa, and you've got some major players there as well, the likes of Angola. You've got the Eastern African countries, Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, some major players there, and of course Southern Africa, with South Africa being the major player in South Africa. However, culturally, historically, we are closest to West Africa.
Yes.
And I heard Mr. Thurl Prudence, for example, former leader of the LPM, now I think he's the chairman of the United Workers' Party, trying to suggest that we have little
links with Nigeria,
links historically with Nigeria, and how slaves did not come from Nigeria; they came from the Gold Coast. They came from Ghana, and that's an unfortunately inaccurate statement from a historical perspective. Because if you go back into the history and you look at it, you'd realize first and foremost we were being influenced by French colonization, most in the early period. And then later on by British, right? And during the French period, the French got slaves from other countries too, from the UK, from the British slavers as well as the Portuguese slavers. But they also had their own slaving interest. And so most of the individuals who came in during the 1700s into St. Lucia were actually not direct from Africa. They actually came through Martinique, Guadeloupe, other French colonies at the time, even Grenada and St. Vincent after 1763 and the Treaty of Paris. And so they were coming in as Creoles, but they were coming in from many, many parts of Africa, from Senegal, from Gambia, from Congo, from Ghana, what is today Ghana. And we're using these names right now, but a lot of those names didn't really even exist. And as well from Nigeria. Right? But Nigeria didn't exist as a state as we know it at that point, of course. You would see references to Benin, you would see references to Togoland, you would see references to the Bight of Biafra, right? These are places very much within Nigeria and close to Nigeria. In fact, the region that we have as Nigeria today is actually known as the Slave Coast. And of course also from Cameroon. So there's a broad area where we in fact saw persons coming in. Even during the British period, we in fact saw even more of a Nigerian influx into the island. And in fact, even in the post-emancipation period after 1838 to 1883, we actually saw a number of freed Africans coming. Similar to how you had in East Indians coming in as indentured laborers. Even before they came in, you actually had a flow of East Africans. And they were, in fact, coming, a number of them came from, in fact, the majority of them, in fact, came from Guinea as well as Biafra, which is today we know as Nigeria. The ports of Calabar, Bonny Island, a number of Lagos, a number of them were in fact these source countries for it. So there is no doubt. I mean, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of DNA, ancestry.com types, 1, 2, 3, and me, whatever. These types of things going on in St. Lucia, and it's something that I hope we can see in terms of genealogical understanding. But I would easily guess that most St. Lucians have some admixture coming out of Nigeria by just the mere fact that people have been mixing over the years. You have, more than likely, Terence Fenelon has some ancestry, some great-great-great-grandmother or grandfather coming out of Nigeria. Likewise for Calix George, likewise for an Andre Paul, likewise for an Alan Chastney, right? So that reality is something that we should not be denying. of ourselves. And it's a very unfortunate state. And even now, Terence, we're already seeing in the immediate, in the 21st century, an ascending Nigeria in Nollywood, in the movies. You remember Emanuela?
Mm-hmm.
You remember back in 2019, Emanuela was there?
Yes.
You know, a child comedian went around.
Yes, yeah.
And where's she from? She's from
Nigeria.
She's Nigerian.
Yes.
You know, you remember Cora Obidi,
That's
who just
right.
a couple
the influencer jazz.
for Carnival, I think she came.
Yeah,
Was it Carnival?
Carnival.
Carnival. She made a entire song about St. Lucia. She loves St. Lucia. She sold St. Lucia so much. People were saying how, you know, what a great value we're getting. She has over 9 million followers or whatever.
Yes.
She's from Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the influence beyond even the Afro beats is there. And Nigerians are playing a major role in so many, including the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
China and Indian students, yes, are in the majority right now in universities in the US, but they're not followed very far behind by Nigerians, you know, and their footprint on the world is rising. And you would very well expect that. This is a country of over 230 million people,
that's
right? That's just the estimate, because it probably could be even a lot more than that.
Of the entire United States of America.
Well,
almost.
It's not quite there yet. Yeah, the US is about almost 330, but the demographers are predicting that by 2050, Nigeria will be the third most populous country in the world after India and China. Right? Africa right now, 1 in 5 births in the world is an African. So this is going to be, by all indications, a century for Africa and African ascendancy. And we, as a small region of about 15 million people in the Caribbean community, we are a small country in Africa, right? But if Africa does well, if Africa is going to be growing, right, we need to be part of that growth of Africa. This is what Sir Arthur Lewis understood when he went across to Ghana to assist Nkrumah, the first independent country in Africa coming out of that colonial period. And he was there with Nkrumah setting up their national development plan, setting out. In fact, interesting enough, even before that, even the colonial period, there's actually a St. Lucian who was a deputy governor in the Gold Coast, a Dubule, actually. Very interesting enough. We have a lot of connections there with respect to Africa. Of course, you've heard about Danley Alexander, who went across there as a legal draftsman, writing the laws, but eventually went up as far as the Chief Justice of Nigeria in a very, very difficult time. There were 2 coups between 1975 and 1979, and he held the fort in many ways. He also acted as president on some of those occasions because he was he could strike that balance as a chief jurist. And we've seen how even during that same period of time, Jalim Udovic very well. His father, of course, Mr. Victor Udovic, went across to Nigeria to understudy the great sculptors of Nigeria who had that tradition of sculpting, and even right now we're seeing how Nigeria is clawing back its rich artifacts, these wonderful bronze.
Yes,
you
Benin.
You get this image, Benin bronzes. You get this image that was created in old propaganda from Europe and parts of the world, that there was nothing good, that Africa was a land of savages, it was a dark continent. People were running around in loincloths, and there was no culture, there was no civilization, and nothing could be further from the truth. Right? And so some of the wondrous pieces, the most ornate bronze sculptures in the world, are finally coming back to Nigeria, right? From European museums around the world.
If England had to give up all what they had, the museums would be empty, because this is all from Africa. Let me say stolen from Africa. So, Alex, I mean, the Nigerian president came here, and there was a backlash. It took me by surprise. I'll be honest with you. Because I thought we were more enlightened. We play all the conscious music. Africa Unite, Zimbabwe.
People dancing to Afro beats all the time. Yeah.
And I just could not understand why that kind of reaction if we are trying to establish relations with our kindred, our brothers, that's our ancestral home. I mean, did that not strike you as odd?
Yes and no. I think the United Workers' Party is showing a level of desperation that is very remarkable, I would say, at this time. I think they're seeing a bit of a writing on the wall for themselves. They know they're on the back foot. They know they are not the favorites at this point in time, and they're looking for anything and everything to be able to grasp onto.
Right.
And so the idea that they would necessarily try to attack a state visit is not completely surprising. However, the way that they've gone about it has been very despicable, nonetheless.
Yes.
Right? Let's not try to make it seem as if it's a nice approach that they've taken. They have gone really to the gutter when it comes to a visit like that. And I would normally have expected this type of attitude from the leader, because we have seen the kind of statements that he has made with respect to our foreign policy. This is a gentleman, I need to remind people, back in 2016 said he was going to close down the foreign missions.
Yes.
This was how he said we didn't need a Minister of External Affairs. He made himself Minister of External Affairs afterwards, and he didn't close down any foreign missions. But he maybe he figured he could have just gone and spoken, and everybody would, just so that would be sufficient for diplomatic relations. But this is what he said in the past. And then we heard his view on the Caribbean and Caribbean integration. We've heard him say the Caribbean Court of Justice was not important when he was speaking in Jamaica
not on his agenda
back in 2018. It was not a priority, as he said it. We very recently, of course, heard him in the OECS Assembly over in St. Vincent, effectively saying that we should be removing ourselves from CARICOM because he didn't feel, he felt like a small boy. Just to paraphrase what he was suggesting, he didn't feel that he was being listened to when he spoke at CARICOM. We're now finding out, of course, from Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves, according to him, that maybe the reason why he was not being listened to is because he's even the worst prime minister of the 21st century coming out of the Caribbean.
Not to brag prime minister.
So we've heard his views. We've also heard his views about colonialism, suggesting that colonialization had a conscience.
Yes.
So we have seen his general direction when it came. We also joined the Lima Group. Remember that move at that time. So we've seen a very clear pattern coming from the leader of the opposition, Mr. Shastney, when it comes to foreign policy.
Right.
I was very surprised, though, however, that the new kid on the block, or one of the new kids on the block, with respect to the United Workers' Party, Mr. Stephen Favre, who has been a career diplomat with the Ministry of External Affairs, with the OECS Commission, and most recently, of course, with the World Trade Organization. I was very surprised that he would have taken up that stance. Now, granted, I suppose he is the de facto shadow minister for external relations, for foreign affairs, and he was perhaps asked or requested of him that he should go speak on the matter of the visit. But I'm surprised at the stance
the position
that he would have taken, especially where he has come from, with his own relations with Africa.
And Nigeria.
And especially with Nigeria.
Yes.
Right? And because, let's remember, he was at Geneva. He was OECS representative there. He worked there. And there was an attempt by Caribbean countries to get a stronger voice at the WTO.
Right.
And the good lady who was putting herself up for election as for Director General of the WTO recognized that they were going to say yes to that idea. And so as a result of that, they agreed to bring on board somebody from the Caribbean to be part of that Director General's cabinet, right, which was formed in 2021, I believe. And so he, in fact, became a member of that DG's cabinet. But the good lady who was the Director General was a two-time finance minister of Nigeria.
Yes.
So his boss was a Nigerian.
Yes.
And he was, in fact, influential in bringing her to St. Lucia back in Independence 2023, right? So that we could strengthen relations with just the WTO, but as well with Nigeria and the African Union because of her ability to influence Africa. He's done a lot of work with respect to Africa. So to then go out and cast aspersions about Nigeria and is really not the diplomatic way to go about doing things. He knows better. And And I think the United Workers' Party on a whole know much better.
Because it was interesting to yesterday at the House, man.
Yes.
That's the first time I really missed the House sitting. It was a long day, busy day, graduations all over the place. And to hear the foreign affairs minister, state that this former government under Alan Shastney, they made the rapprochement to form diplomatic relations with Nigeria, and to have them take that stance now. I mean, that's hypocrisy at its height.
And forming relations with Nigeria is a no-brainer. You obviously want to do this. This is the leading country in West Africa, the largest economy in West Africa, right? Yes. Strong cultural ties, punching way above its weight in terms of its cultural reach around the world right about now.
Right.
An oil and gas giant, right? Lots of oil reserves. It is clearly going places, in many respects. Going to be a third most populous country in the world. Lagos, largest city there, is, it's going to be the largest city in the world. That's one of the projections as well. Even right now, it's over 21 million people in Lagos. More people in Lagos than in the Caribbean. Yeah. So it's obvious that we should be looking at those types of relationships. And it really has exposed the United Workers' Party to a level of hypocrisy. In my view.
Lack of credibility.
On this entire matter, because they clearly would have liked, if they were in power right now, they would have been doing the same thing. I would, I don't know. I would have hoped that they would have been doing the same thing.
Yes.
And the reason why I'm also saying that is because I stand to be corrected, but I believe we were supposed to have had a visit sometime back in 2019 by the president of Kenya, Mr. Kenyatta. And I don't know what happened to that. It was supposed to be a 3-country visit. He ended up going to only Barbados and Jamaica. I don't know why he never ended up.
All right.
I don't know why he never ended up coming in.
Let me read something for you quickly. It's about a 2-minute read. I'll tell you where it's from afterwards. Strengthening South-South relations. The official visit of His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, to St. Lucia, marks more than a symbolic diplomatic gesture. It represents a bold and strategic step forward in St. Lucia's foreign policy. In today's increasingly uncertain and polarized geopolitical landscape, small island developing states like ours must not remain passive observers. We must actively shape our own future by forging deeper ties with nations that share our history, values, culture, and aspirations. Nigeria is Africa's most populous nation and a rising continental powerhouse. Therefore, it represents a natural and vital partner in this effort. The visit lays the groundwork for stronger political, cultural, and economic cooperation between St. Lucia and Nigeria, 2 countries that are connected not only by the Atlantic Ocean, but by the deep roots of African heritage, resilience, and a shared vision for inclusive development and self-determination. It is time for our country to deliberately strengthen South-South cooperation, aligning with fellow nations in the global South that understand our struggles with climate vulnerability, development, financing, food security, and the legacies of colonialism. These alliances must become central pillars in our foreign policy, not as a rejection of our long-standing partnerships with countries in the global north, but as a necessary broadening of our engagement with the world. St. Lucia can and must walk confidently on both legs, maintaining respectful and productive ties with our traditional partners while cultivating new and dynamic relationships with countries like Nigeria, Brazil, Ghana, South Africa, India, and others in the global south who share our commitment to justice, equity, and sustainable development. This is not just diplomacy. It is a strategy for resilience, self-respect, and global relevance. Kudos to the government of St. Lucia for taking this important first step. That's by a very cerebral guy, Dr. Jimmy Fletcher.
Indeed. No, I mean, he's spot on. And right now we're seeing 2 state visits, right, in the Caribbean. Right? One, of course, was St. Lucia with the President Tinubu of Nigeria. And of course, he could have gone to a number of other countries in the Western Hemisphere. He could have gone to Guyana, which of course is seeing a world's fastest growing economy of oil and gas. Could have gone to Jamaica, which is quite often seen as the heart of the Caribbean. He could have gone to many, Cuba, wherever, Mexico. He chose to come to St. Lucia, right, as the sort of de facto main country within the Eastern Caribbean. And that's a very significant honor for us, an opportunity for us to be that linchpin in Nigeria's foray into the rest of the Caribbean. And then, of course, we're also now seeing Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India visiting Trinidad and Tobago. He arrived yesterday, already being provided lots of different honors, as we rightfully know. And again, India, a major growing power, world's most populous country. A lot of similarities there.
Yes.
And then in the case of Trinidad, it's obvious the cultural ties. 45% of Trinidad's population is East Indian descent. But here, where we have 85% of the population being of African descent, this move is very, very much timely, and it is going to place us in a very good position, given the fact that we're seeing some of these shifts in our traditional partners and how they themselves are seeing us. Nigeria has oil and gas, natural gas. That's very, very important.
Yes.
Nigeria has people. Nigeria has there've been a tradition actually of doctors coming out of Nigeria in the past, here in St. Lucia and in the rest of the Caribbean. So clearly there is that opportunity there in terms of healthcare. In fact, right now I think there are Nigerian consultants who are part of through the World Bank assisting in terms of universal healthcare. So you have a lot of expertise coming out of Nigeria. The possibility of trade. Any great power around the world right now is looking to trade with Africa. And with Nigeria. This is why China is there.
The Chinese
this is why India is there.
Yes.
This is why the Europeans have been there for a very, very long time, right? Because they can understand, they see the wealth of Africa. Right? And we, as an extension of Africa, can play a major part in that bigger economy. Quite often, people want to see what is that general tie-in of likeness quite often. So you have North America, you have the Western world. The Western world is European dominated, right? Ties between North America, Australia, Europe. Here we can do that tie-in across the Middle Passage, across the Atlantic, and in fact open up markets of opportunity for our own individuals in terms of what we can also share. So there are a lot of opportunities. We've heard, of course, 2 cooperation agreements already signed on to. One is for technical cooperation, technical assistance from Nigeria. That is a major step. We know we're under pressure from the United States in terms of the Cuban medical mission program.
Yes.
What are we going to be able to do if in fact it comes to a head and they decide that they're going to somehow try to stop this program? I know there's been a lot of pushback from Caribbean leaders, but we're seeing the threats. And so we as well need to ensure that we can make partnerships in other parts of the world. Nigeria is already doing a fair bit of that. Jamaica said that they want 400 Nigerian professionals to come to Jamaica. Right, they're already Nigerians heading to Grenada and other parts of the Caribbean. So we definitely will be better off in that regard in terms of getting that kind of support. There's also, of course, the issue of fashion. Right, that's another good little area. And of course, there was a cultural cooperation agreement signed between the 2 islands tourism ministers 2 nights ago. And that is a really important move in my view as well, because could you imagine, Terry, maybe you see what Ghana is doing already. Ghana is recognizing through its connections with slavery, it is creating a cultural tourism product that brings people back to Elmina Castle, to these slave castles along the coastline, reconnecting people with themselves, with their ancestors. And so that 20 plus million African Americans who are out there who are looking for this cultural experience and understanding and rediscovery of themselves. A lot of them are going to Ghana. The same can be done with respect to the Caribbean as well as with Africa. So there are many of these opportunities there. So
I have a quick question. Just a quick question.
Go ahead,
Mr. George or Mr. Fenelon. I'm curious to know how this visit what happened? What caused this the Nigerian president to visit St. Lucia? And why St. Lucia? Because I know the Barbados Prime Minister has been pushing for this a lot. Right. By the way, was she here as part of the visiting delegation?
No, so she wasn't here.
Okay.
It was actually at an OECS level,
Right.
Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. And you're very correct, Andre. Barbados has been a real pioneer in terms of pushing as a representation of the Caribbean. From 2021, we know Afreximbank has signed that agreement, right?
The headquarters will be in Barbados.
They have $180 million US dollar headquarters being built right now
in Barbados
on Gemmet Lane in Bridgetown, and that is a major step. But we're also seeing the benefits of Afreximbank right now, of course, as we know, in terms of the schools that are being built, Entrepot School,
yes.
Expanded, I should say, the Grand Riviere School, others. This move was more by the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States and St. Lucia trying to push towards a stronger connection with Africa. So this was our own diplomatic efforts with respect to Nigeria. There have been efforts, for example, as the former President of Ghana visited Barbados a couple of years ago, and as well Jamaica, St. Vincent. So I expect to see a number of more visits to come from even other countries of Africa. We are seeing support from Kenya, for example, an East African country, but supporting us in Haiti in terms of trying to stabilize the situation there. So I will expect to see more of these types of visits in the future, because it is definitely needed, but also expect to see the cultural exchange, the study tours, the artists.
Let me again read.
But I'm just curious. Why St. Lucia?
Well, why not St. Lucia?
No, I don't know.
We remember we hosted Nelson Mandela in 1998.
Yes.
Right, for the CARICOM 25th anniversary. And we've shown that we've been able to do so.
Yes.
And I think the move was very central. St. Lucia has, from an OECS perspective, let's remember, is also sort of like the de facto capital. The Supreme Court is here. The OECS Commission is based here, and we've had ties with Nigeria as well. In fact, somebody said Mr. Osbert Dove has Nigerian cousins.
Okay.
I met some members of the Cox family who are Nigerian, in fact, right? So there are some connections, and there are a number of Nigerians who also have come to St. Lucia over the years.
Now, Andre, let me just read there. The president landed on Saturday. That was the 30th?
29th.
The 29th. And Andre, listen to that. The federal government of Nigeria has begun the deployment of skilled professionals to St. Lucia and other Eastern Caribbean countries following the signing of a new technical manpower assistance agreement aimed at strengthening diplomatic ties and deepening South-South cooperation. The agreement was signed on Wednesday, the 2nd of July. People are asking, what is the significance? What are we benefiting? The agreement was signed on Wednesday, July the 2nd, 2025 in Castries, the capital of St. Lucia. Representing Nigeria was the Director General of the Nigerian Technical Aid Corps, Honorable Yusuf Buba Yacob, while Janil Modest Stephen, the Acting Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of External Affairs, International Trade, Civil Aviation, and the Diaspora Affairs, signed on behalf of St. Lucia. This is an outstanding achievement just days after Mr. President's directive to deploy technical aid to St. Lucia and the wider OECS, said Yacob during the signing ceremony. Under the agreement, listen, Andre, Nigeria will send volunteers, including teachers, medical professionals, and agriculturists, who will serve in OECS countries for 2 years initially. Nigeria will cater for their allowances and logistics. In other words, no expense to us, while the host countries are expected to provide accommodation and other legal stuff. 100 Calix. This was signed on the 2nd of, today's the 4th, Friday, so that was signed on Wednesday. And this is already in action.
Terry and Andre, the other thing too, Nigeria is producing some of the best doctors in the world.
Yes.
Right? We have been trying to benefit from this through our offshore schools. A number of Nigerians actually came here to Sparta to be able to study and to be able to go off into the United States of America. My father's first cousin in Trinidad was actually married to a Nigerian doctor, actually. So we've had that tradition of Nigerians being able to, and they've got the numbers too. Let's not forget this. At the time right now when we have one of the lowest fertility rates in the world, in St. Lucia, and we ourselves are facing a population crisis, we also need to be thinking about how we can deal with that matter in terms of our own immigration policy. So this is a really important step in the right direction, and there are also opportunities, I think, as I said, in terms of the cultural aspect of it. Terry, I hope to see at the next visit, when next time we have a parliamentary visit, a parliamentary meeting with a head of state come in, or even maybe for emancipation, that all our MPs in Kinte, they are dressed in African wear. We need to be start making some of these symbolic shifts in that direction to re-embrace ourselves. The idea of teaching an African language is something I know Trinidad has been doing at UE. They've been teaching Yoruba. Why not at South Louis Community College? We're teaching Mandarin, right? So we need to be thinking about these types of connections, because Africa is over 1 billion people, right? It's a major player. It's not that far. It's much closer to Africa than Asia for us. So these types of cooperations, I think, are very important. The flights are critical, and we've heard some statements being made by the president as well, that he wants to see that happen. We've seen a few attempts in terms of charters. St. Kitts had one recently. Antigua, Barbados. Yes. So these small, tepid steps in that direction. And I think we would love to see the day when we can actually begin seeing maybe a direct flight, from the Caribbean to Africa. We also need to start thinking about our own diplomatic presence in Africa. That's another thing too. And I know Prime Minister Motley has been speaking about that. The Prime Minister of St. Lucia and others are going to be going across to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in September as part of a Caribbean Africa summit. In fact, the president left Abuja, right? He was attending an Afreximbank meeting in Abuja before he came here. And the Prime Ministers Terence Drew of St. Kitts and Nevis, as well as Deacon Mitchell of Grenada, they were at that meeting too. And that goes to show that the OECS is very serious about this type of relationship of strengthening it. And I also want to make a point too, Andre. Both Modi and Tinubu are also heading to Brazil afterwards.
For the BRICS conference.
Right, exactly. Right? And BRICS has been one of the oldest South-South groupings that have been in existence. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. But it's now broader than just those 5 countries. It actually now includes Nigeria and some others. So that grouping is also seeing how they can partner on a number of different programs and sharing. So we were really very fortunate that we could have had a piece of the action, so to speak. All right, because then in some of these forums, who is representing our interests? Right, we have nobody at the BRICS table. We have nobody at the G20 table, right? And we have to be thinking of how can we ensure that our concerns, whether it's on climate change, whether it's on security, economic development, how are those concerns also being represented at those fora?
Now, there's something I would have loved to touch on quickly. The award of our highest award to His Excellency Tinubu. I mean, that created quite a stir. And when you look, Modi has been accused of all kinds of things under the sun. Human rights violations, all kinds of things under the sun. He was awarded, because I think he's living Trinidad today, the highest award from Trinidad. Not only that too, but Modi has also been bestowed with the highest award from Guyana, Dominica, and is it Trinidad also? No, I'm saying Trinidad. 3 other countries. I think Jamaica, Guyana, Dominica.
And it is very customary that when countries are trying to deepen their ties, that they certainly do also honor the heads of state. Right? I think some people are sometimes getting into looking at the internal issues of countries and believing.
But we do not establish relationship with a person.
We do
it
with
a country.
With a country. If we had that attitude, where would we have been with Taiwan? Taiwan has had 3 sitting heads of state visit St. Lucia. Chen Shui-bian, during the Stevenson King administration, Mr. Ma Ying-jeou under the Kenyan administration, and under the Shasney administration, Tsai Ing-wen. Chen Shui-bian, remember the red envelope story?
Red envelopes, yeah.
Remember, after that, Chen Shui-bian was imprisoned in a Taiwanese jail.
Went to jail.
Right?
Yes.
For corruption and whatever other stuff. Are we stopping our relationships with Taiwan at that point because of what he happened?
With a country.
And that is the point. And I think all political parties know about that, including the United Workers' Party. And I think we as a country need to see the opportunities as a region, as a country on this matter.
Now my producer is going to be upset with me if I don't play that clip. You know, I do not want problems with my producer. So just bear. It's about 10 minutes, Andre. We cool. So Andre, just cue it in. It's supposed to be 24 minutes, but we have cut it down. So let's cue that.
It's about 14
for the
minutes
world.
now.
Yeah, let the world hear.
All right. Should I play it now?
Yes, go ahead, Andre.
Okay.
Immediate results. An OECS Nigeria Joint Commission on Education has been established to arrange for St. Lucian and Eastern Caribbean students to receive scholarships to attend Nigerian universities in the forthcoming academic year. And the ministers of tourism of St. Lucia and Nigeria have already met to discuss areas of cooperation in that sector. But, Mr. Speaker, there is a deeper, more fundamental and philosophical reason for St. Lucia to have entertained a visit from the President of Nigeria. It is rooted in our history, in the story of how our forefathers and ancestors were transported in European slave ships from Africa, including the lands of Nigeria and other West African states to St. Lucia, and other Caribbean states to work on European plantations. The tragedy of the slavery of African people in the Western Hemisphere and our connections with Nigeria were eloquently captured by those who addressed the joint sitting of Parliament on Monday, the 30th of June, 2025. First, by Senate President Alvina Reynolds when she said, and I quote, "Today, your arrival in St. Lucia commences the rediscovery of the bonds between the people of St. Lucia and the people of Nigeria. Today, your visit reignites a mission to reunite us with our homeland and for our people to work together," unquote. Secondly, in the words of Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Joseph Pierre, and I quote, "Our peoples have been separated, but nothing has ever been able to separate us spiritually and culturally from West Africa, where some of our ancestors came from and for whom our hearts continually yearn. We are African people who have made permanent homes for ourselves on this side of the Atlantic, on the hills and valleys of the plantations on which we were enslaved, and along the seashores, waterways that carried the slave ships which brought us here. We feel untold joy, honor, and pride that our two countries are taking this important step of reconnection at such an important moment in world history, and when the future role of Africa in the modern world can no longer be denied," unquote. Thirdly, by President Tinubu, quote, "As one who feels a profound kinship with our shared African heritage, I am fully aware of the historical currents that have bound us together, currents shaped by the transatlantic slave trade and colonial subjugation, but out of which emerged a shared cultural identity, a resilience and a legacy of aspiration. My presence here today symbolizes Nigeria's renewed commitment to re-engage with these enduring ties. Recognizing the strategic and emotional significance, this occasion serves as a testament to the enduring ideals of Pan-Africanism and to the unyielding desire for unity and collaboration among peoples of African descent," unquote. Mr. Speaker, St. Lucia's Africa policy is therefore also founded on the objective of rekindling our cultural ties with our African motherland, of inculcating in our people a pride and respect for the lands of their ancestors, and of emancipating their minds from the colonial indoctrination that everything African is negative. It is this indoctrination which is behind some of the shameful and disrespectful comments which we have witnessed on social media and some traditional media talk shows with regard to the visit of President Tinubu to St. Lucia. It is our responsibility to lift our people from this ignorance and from the depths to which hateful, petty, and desperate opposition politics has plunged them. For you see, Mr. Speaker, unlike the leader of the opposition, we are not of the view that colonialism had a conscience. It certainly did not. As evidenced by what it did to Africa and our countries here in the Caribbean. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn my attention to the matter of the national honor bestowed upon the President of Nigeria, His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu, St. Lucia's highest honor of a knighthood. This government does not confer St. Lucia's national honors lightly, Mr. Speaker. We are not like the former Prime Minister and member for Miku South, leader of the opposition, who gave the former President of American Airlines, Peter Dolora, the St. Lucia Cross at a time when St. Lucia was paying American Airlines to come to St. Lucia. It is important for us all to recognize the value of diplomacy and expertise it requires, regardless of one's level of experience or background, especially those who claim to be modern-day diplomats. We should strive to approach discussions with professionalism and a shared commitment to constructive dialogue, fostering an environment where respect and understanding can flourish for the benefit of all. And for those who have protested strongly against this honoring knighthood for the President, even more vigorously than they did against his visit itself, let me inform them, Mr. Speaker, that the conferring of national honors to visiting foreign heads of state or government by a receiving country is again a standard and commonly utilized tool of diplomatic practice. It is done to enhance relations between the states, to underscore the close and friendly relations between countries, and to demonstrate the high regard in which the visiting head of state or government is held. For example, Mr. Speaker, in July 2023, the government of Venezuela, led by President Nicolas Maduro, bestowed upon the Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Mottley, during her first official visit to that country, the Order of the Liberators of Venezuela, which is the highest honor of Venezuela. According to the Barbados Foreign Ministry, the two countries were seeking to strengthen relations and increase cooperation. And as fate would have it, Mr. Speaker, today, Prime Minister Modi of India arrives in Trinidad and Tobago for a 2-day official visit. And during that period, he will be awarded the country's highest award, the Order of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. The Trinidadian government has justified the award, saying that his visit would bring diverse benefits to Trinidad and Tobago, and that there is nothing preventing the government from conferring the highest award to Prime Minister Modi. It should be noted also that free order CARICOM countries have already bestowed Prime Minister Modi with the country's highest awards. These are Barbados, the Order of Freedom of Barbados, Dominica, Award of Honor, and Guyana, the Order of Excellence of Guyana. Let me also take this opportunity to point out that Trinidad and Tobago has closed all non-essential public services and schools early to facilitate Prime Minister Modi's visit and to minimize traffic congestion. Of even more relevance to St. Lucia is the fact that in 1973, 6 years before St. Lucia's independence, the then Premier of St. Lucia, Sir John Compton, was awarded the Francis de Miranda Award by Venezuelan Foreign Minister Dr. Aristide Calvani, and was later, as Prime Minister, bestowed the Simon Bolivar Award, the Order of the Liberators of Venezuela, by Venezuelan President Carlos Andrés Pérez. Did the people of Venezuela ask what Sir John Compton had done for Venezuela? No, Mr. Speaker, because as in the case of Prime Minister Mia Mottley and others who have received such national awards from friendly governments, they know that this advances the cause of cooperation and friendship between countries. And today, the deep friendly relations between Venezuela and St. Lucia, which began with the national honors given to Sir John Compton, still exist, except for the brief period of folly of the Lima Group. And just as the Venezuelan national honors given to Sir John helped create the basis of Venezuela-St. Lucia cooperation, so the knighthood conferred upon President Tinubu will cement the commencement of harmonious and prosperous relations between Nigeria and St. Lucia. Hence, Mr. Speaker, those who should know better about diplomacy and international relations should not be hypocritical in the pronouncements about St. Lucia's current foreign policy actions. I call them hypocritical, Mr. Speaker, for good reason. These same people who have led the song and dance against our advances to Nigeria had themselves decided to establish diplomatic relations with Nigeria. Yes, Mr. Speaker, let me read to you a cabinet conclusion of the 3rd of June 2019. Of 2019.
Read it again. Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, let me read to you a cabinet conclusion of 3rd of June 2019. And I quote, Cabinet Conclusion 502 of 2019 states that Cabinet considered a memorandum dated 13th May 2019. The opposition occupied the corridors of power at the time, submitted by the Department of External Affairs, and approved the request for the establishment of diplomatic relations with Nigeria, unquote. So the member for Miku South and his government decided 6 years ago to establish diplomatic relations with Nigeria. But today, they are trying to make the country believe that this administration's hosting of the Nigerian president is not in St. Lucia's interest, and it is a silly foreign policy decision. Ces hommes opposition, yo tout partout kon poule qui pon, ka di moun kon sa, dat se pate pièce kalte bon bagay pour embrasser Nigeria. Mais c'est yo même qui allé en own cabinet yo, et puis décider pour établir relation diplomatique et puis Nigeria. Mais je dis à nous en pouvoir, président vini, tout partout, tout chaud ba yo. Mais yo pon bloc et yo kay prend pour toujours. Parce que yo ka dérespecter président, yo ka dérespecter moun qui ka visiter nous, ka kouye yo nou toute qualité non. Mais nous kay adresser ça à sous plateforme avec l'autre côté. But whilst they decided in the cabinet to recognize Nigeria, what is in fact indisputable is that although they decided on establishing diplomatic relations with Nigeria, they did nothing about it. Nothing came of it because of the incompetence. It took the wise diplomacy and leadership of Philip Joseph Pierre, Prime Minister and member for Kaswis East, to advance St. Lucia-Nigeria relations in the spectacular manner we observed this week with the highly successful official visit of President Tinubu. So as I prepare to take my brief statement to its logical conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I wish to say that a new era has begun in St. Lucia's relations with the countries of the African continent. And members opposite better get used to it. They better brace themselves, because we are going to continue to improve our relations with our motherland to ensure we create an improved framework for us to match our basic need with greater possibilities. St. Lucia's diplomacy is actively pursuing its goal of advancing the country's national interest through the forging of new alliances. And what better alliance to build than one with our long-lost brothers from Nigeria? Mr. Speaker, I thank you for granting me leave to make this brief statement.
Andre, I felt this was important to play. People must hear from the horse's mouth. Alva is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mm-hmm. He has the conclusions, and he was able to explain. As I said before, Andre, when we on this program meet the Minister, we come with the truth. Nothing else but the truth. We want to educate our people. We want to lift them up from their position. I mean, yeah, you could be ignorant. I'm using that word in the proper context. Mm-hmm. Lack of knowledge. So we want to dispel the ignorance and educate you, because you must be educated as a people. You know, and we do not want you just going around splashing your ignorance on the internet for all the world to see. Get the facts and get the facts right. Now, I know Calix has official duties. You notice he's dressed in his nice tie and stuff. He has duties to perform. So I'll give you a few minutes. Andre has been kind to give us a few minutes, so you could wrap up. Give us your final thoughts.
Yeah, I think this has been a very great moment for St. Lucia, for the Eastern Caribbean, for the Caribbean, and of course Nigeria and West Africa. It's historic, it's momentous. I think so many people would be, in the past, would have been looking back now. If they could have seen this moment, they would be so overjoyed. Whether it had been Marcus Garvey, whether it had been John Quinlan, who was a St. Lucian who went to London in 1900 for the first Pan-African conference, right, after the whole efforts of Europe to take over Africa, and who represented the interests of a united African people. Whether it would be Derek Walcott, because I'm sure you're aware, Terry and Andre, that the first Nobel Prize winner, Black Nobel Prize winner exactly. The first Black Nobel Prize winner for literature was Wole Soyinka in 1986 from Nigeria. And the second Black Nobel Prize winner for literature, 1992. That's right. Sir Derek Walcott. And even though there was that ocean apart,
they were good friends.
They were very, very good friends.
Yes.
And in fact, Wole visited Nigeria. Wole visited St. Lucia. Yeah. He would go sailing with Sir Derek, have a good time, and they were very close. And he wrote about when Derek left. He wrote about traveling on this eternal sea. And Derek himself wrote a very important poem, I think, that really captures, in my view, this moment of Africa and the Caribbean. It's called Love After Love. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at each other's welcome and say, "Eat, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself." And I think this moment is really us looking at ourselves in the mirror, finding our long lost family, effectively, and effectively a child being ripped away from his or her mother is now returning to that mother. And that is the relationship with Africa and the Caribbean, in my view, the Caribbean and Africa. And so I really hope that beyond the symbolism, of course, that we can begin to see the real, tangible benefits accruing on both sides of this sea. And let us hope as well that we will be able to have a more enlightened approach in terms of Africa and the Caribbean. I heard a lot of people on various talk shows saying, oh, they were doing research. I really hope they start doing research about Africa. I really hope they start doing their own research about their own ancestry and their own family. Right. I hope this is a seminal moment for every St. Lucian to begin thinking about who they are, what made them who they are, and beginning to reconnect with themselves.
Yes. Andre, I want to thank you for the extra time.
You're welcome.
People are called, you know already. We are not ministers. You know, I apologize for the minister not being here. And last minute, he had to fly out. You know, the foreign minister had.
There's a CARICOM heads meeting in Jamaica.
Right, so it should have been the president of the Republic of Liberia. But hopefully next week we'll see how it goes. So thank you again, Andre, for allowing us the extra time, and the people and our friends in the Radio Land, Facebook. I hope that we are able to, you know, add to your stock of knowledge. You know, I hope we are able to do that in the nicest way. So thank you, Andre, and see you next week. Thank you, Calix, for being here, for gracing us with your presence.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fenelon. Thank you, Mr. George. Have yourself a nice day and a great weekend.
You too.
Thank you very much. You've been listening to and viewing Meet the Minister. Thanks a lot. Until next week, Friday, same time, from 10 until 11. Andre Paul wishing you a nice day. So long.